Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Getrude Matshe here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman coming to us all the way from the United States. Welcome to our tribe once again. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here. My name is Comfort Dondo, and I am based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am a 38-year-old community leader, and I'm very happy to be on the show today. Thank you so much for having me.
So, where does your story begin?
So my story begins, actually, I am born in Zimbabwe, right outside the outskirts of Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. But the township I was born in did not reflect the capital city at all. It was quite a modest, according to outsiders, probably impoverished part of Zimbabwe. But for me, growing up as a child, it was one of the richest places because of the sense of community. My story starts about age 9, when I was sexually abused by an uncle who lived with us. It was in that moment, at that young age, that I began to find ways to escape mentally. I withdrew. I began to find ways to escape at that young age, including planning how I would leave my environment. So I grew up just not wanting to be in my environment. In addition, around the same age, I also began to notice the domestic violence that was happening around my community. I also began to notice the height of the HIV pandemic in my area, with almost every other person I knew losing 2 or 3 members of the family. So my childhood is really where my story starts. So in my quest to move away from all the tragic and the pain, I found myself in the middle of a snowstorm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA at age 17, with a small suitcase and a big dream, without even knowing how I was going to fulfill the dream. But I want to say, I always say I had a small suitcase and a big dream, but I also had a very big invisible knapsack. That was the trauma I had brought with me from Zimbabwe. And my journey begins here in the Minnesota in USA. Um, as I started to find myself as a young woman with unhealed trauma, and that's where the real journey began for me. I met my first husband at age 21. He was a Minnesotan, and I began to attract what I call a vicious cycle of the very things I was trying to run away from. So I relived my childhood in my adulthood. And the only difference is that I now had small children involved with it. So I survived domestic violence, extreme systemic violence, from around 25 to about my mid 30s. I was literally in a vicious cycle of something that I would later learn was resulting from unhealed trauma. And this is what brings me to this platform today, the personal work, healing work I had to do, to when I posed and asked the question, why do I keep reliving the same cycle, no matter how hard I was trying to live that? And it was realizing in the moment when I realized, as I was writing my journal, which then turns into my first book called Facing the Giants, I realized that I needed to heal my childhood trauma, and I needed to go and collect the young girl I left in the small township in Harare, Zimbabwe, and bring her along with me to my adulthood and heal her. And that was the changing moment for me. So since then, I have started a movement, My Sister's Keeper, where we do discuss healing in culturally specific ways. I have also started a very successful nonprofit organization called Phumulani, Minnesota African Women Against Violence. And although it's based in Minnesota, it's actually a global outreaching nonprofit that really works with ending all forms of violence against women and girls, sexual violence, domestic violence, trafficking. And the core focus of our program, or the core focus of my work right now, is ending cycles of violence through helping even both perpetrators, survivors, and victims, helping them find their healing. Because I believe that ending violence is how we're going to heal. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share my story.
Your story is absolutely amazing, Comfort. And the interesting thing is, for a lot of women who have experienced sexual abuse, violence of any sort, they do end up repeating that cycle, that pattern, and attracting the same kind of person in their lives. Now, you've done a
Absolutely.
lot of work on yourself, and I'm sure you're now using what you've learned personally to help other women. What is it that a woman needs to be aware of so they don't get sucked into the same situation again?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gertrude. You know, I'm one of the things I identified, or one of the sayings I'm very well known for saying, is you cannot heal what you cannot reveal, or you cannot really heal something until you identify what it is. That's the first step. A lot of the women that I work with, they have not even identified the language of what's happening to them. So they just know that what's happening to them does not feel right. They know that there's a pattern. Sometimes they're not even aware of the pattern. They just think it's a coincidence. So the first step for the women is reflect and identify, name things. And once you start naming things, you start to take your power back. So here's an example. If you have two partners in a row who are emotionally abusive, that's really invisible, but you can feel it, that they're being abusive. The belittling, they're making you feel like you're not yourself. Name that. It is emotional abuse. Unless you name it, you will never be able to heal it, and you won't be able to prevent it. So that's the first step. The second step is never like disagree with your intuition. When your intuition is telling you that something is not right, then something is really not right. Do not be in isolation. A lot of abusers like to isolate. In isolation is where a lot of women end up, being abused severely for longer periods of time. I say always stay connected to your tribe of sisters, your truth sayers, who can tell you that, these days you're not really being yourself, who can really give you honest feedback. These are the two main things that I really encourage, especially women and young women. When you start to feel like things are not, adding up, or I'm feeling like my spirit is being violated, to just name it, and then deal with that right away. And I say, do not wait. Do not contemplate leaving. It takes an average of about 7 times for any survivor of domestic violence to leave abuse. 7 times. So it's a very complex, vicious cycle. But I think the 7-time figure is something that can be avoided if you're surrounded by people who love you and who can encourage you to supporting you to leave. Because for a lot of women, they end up living in a cascade if they don't leave early enough. So those are my points that I would always share with women.
So what would one do if you are not prepared financially, for example? You talked about women being isolated. A lot of time that isolation also goes into economic isolation. You end up finding yourself not working at home, totally dependent on the man that you're with. And then you don't have the money to even leave, even if you wanted to. So what are the steps that one should put in place to be able to get the financial resources and leave? And even if you don't have the money, how do you find the organizations that can help you get out of that abusive situation?
Good question. I'll touch back a little bit on the isolation piece. A lot of the women that end up coming to our homes, or who end up calling our crisis line, have been living in isolation for an average of 5 to 10 years. That's the time they were living with their abuser. So this really makes it hard to plan. But when they do come in contact and maybe they're not ready to leave, we have what we call a safety plan, a safety exit plan. That you plan your exit quietly, putting everything in place, especially when there are children involved, and plan it in a way that the abuser never knows about your plans, because this is the most dangerous time when women plan to leave, when women plan to exit. Normally, they are not able to exit. Just for context sakes, here in Minneapolis last week, we were just doing a procession. We had 25 cars representing each woman who was killed in 2021. 25 women were killed due to domestic violence, homicide here in Minnesota. This is the USA, first world country, and those are just the documented number. By next year, we'll be knowing that there'll be additional numbers after the evidence is found. So this is what I always encourage women. As far as staying in touch, I always say keep those three friends that you can tell everything. Because what happens with abuse is that the abuser makes you feel like you're not worthy, and they make you feel like you cannot depend on anybody else. So what ends up happening is the victim survivors, they're normally even isolated from their own family. And then I also want to touch on the cultural aspects. I'll speak for my the African community, but this happens even in mainstream communities where there's a tendency to want to keep up appearances, right? You hear a lot of women saying, I was just trying to keep it together. They have to show up on social media looking like everything is dandy. And yet, they are really dying on the inside. So I want to say, really assess and see what is it that is very important to you. Is it to please everybody else on the outside world and be crying and being beat at behind closed doors? Some women also say they're staying for the children. This is a common one. I'm staying for the children. I heard this a lot growing up with my African sisters. But one thing we don't realize is that when children observe domestic violence, they are much impacted into their adulthood. So for you to break that cycle and make sure that your children are modeling and they're also seeing a positive and healthy relationship patterns, you may not want to keep it together for the children, because what you're keeping together is really a poison for the children. Domestic violence affects children from the time they're observing it up into their adulthood, which then creates that cycle in the next generation. Yeah.
You're very right. A lot of women do think that they are doing it for their families and they're trying to keep it together, but they do more damage than good.
Absolutely.
Now, you are involved with the Her Story movement. You are going to be one of our key partners in bringing the movement to the United States. I know that there are a lot of women in your networks who have amazing stories. What nuggets of wisdom would you give them in terms of coming onto our platform and presenting, and the benefits that they can get by being a part of sharing their story?
I am super delighted, looking forward to this year because of this partnership we're having, Getrude. And I want to say I am the woman that I am today, who's able to use my pain for a platform and my purpose. I found my purpose in my pain. And I know that the Her Story platform is one such place. A lot of women have not had the chance or have not had the safe space to share their stories. And I really know that working with you, Her Story platform is going to be enable and coach and give permission to a lot of women and men, who have a story to share, who might have a very painful, hard to share story. I think it's a place where they're going to be able to not only share the story, but share it in an impactful manner, and then share it in a way that has a lot of more impact beyond their own circle. And then on top of that, I want to say I've been able to share my story in a way that's actually created for me. Are you sharing your story, but you're also sharing your story and monetizing that part. So I'm really excited, and I'm hoping that as many people who have everybody has a story, as many people can join the platform. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I think from my end, one of the things that I want women to be aware of is that our platform is not just a speaking platform. We will help with the publishing of your story in our Her Story magazine. You will get published in an anthology with 9 other women. So we have 10 women in every volume. And you get to own your story, no matter what it is that has happened in your life. By sharing it, you're going to be helping another woman who might be in a similar situation, not knowing how to get out. And then they read your book or they hear you speak on these international stages. Then that becomes a real game changer. So we're really excited that your community is going to be coming onto our platform, and we'll be working and collaborating with you in the United States to bring about some magic in women's lives, because we can change the world. And it's going to be one story at a time, one woman at a time, with each of us honoring all the experiences we've gone through. I mean, Comfort, when I look at you, where you came from, what you've gone through to be this amazing mentor, a coach, helping and empowering other women is absolutely incredible. So we'll end the interview with one question. If you could go back to the younger you, that young woman who found herself in a cycle of domestic violence, abuse, and give her 3 nuggets of wisdom, what would you say to her? And I'm asking this so that if there is a young woman or even an older woman right now who's listening to us on this podcast, watching us on YouTube, and she's saying, what do I do? How do I get out of it? What 3 pieces of advice could you give her?
Absolutely. The first one is I would tell her that it's going to be okay. So that give yourself permission, it's going to be okay. That's the first one. The second nugget of wisdom I would give to any young woman listening under the sound of my voice is that the ultimate maker, your maker, already knows your path before you were born. And every single thing that happens to you, at you, within you, he already knows. And a lot of it, he allows to happen for a purpose. So find your purpose in your pain. The third thing is, please do not stay in your pain too much, lest it will drown you. Find your way up outside of the pain and try to use it as a platform. Step on it as a platform. The world is waiting for you to step on that platform and share that pain in a way that will be healing for others. This is what I would tell my younger self.
Absolutely inspiring. Thank you so much for coming online today and sharing your story with us, inspiring women worldwide to step into their power, own their stories, and change their lives. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. The Her Story movement is going global. We have now got amazing partners like Comfort in the United States to bring it to the US. We're looking for more partners in the UK, in Europe. So wherever you are in the world, if you are inspired to be a part of this amazing movement, please get in touch. My email is at the bottom of the screen, admin@herstorycircle.com. And if you're in the US, Comfort, what website can people find you?
They can find me on www.phumulani.org, and Phumulani is spelled P like Paul, HUMULANI.org. And my full name is Comfort Dondo. I can also be found on Facebook. I'm on all social media platforms. So, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. Yeah.
Awesome to connect with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. We will
Thank you.
see you again when I come back with yet another amazing guest tomorrow. Have a fantastic day, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Comfort.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now.
Bye-bye.